So when did I start seeing when my mental health was declining? I would say when went back to work. So I had 4 weeks off for paternity leave, and that was absolutely fine. So being at home, it was absolutely fine. I felt really fine. I didn't sleep, because babies don't sleep. So we didn't get a lot of sleep. When I really started to first notice this, although actually thinking about it, I didn't really notice initially. I just kind of thought it was just part of being a dad, I guess. I started to, struggle to get up to go to work. Didn't really want to go to work. And usually I absolutely love going to work. So back then I just started being an assistant lecturer, and, I was excited, motivated, and I just kind of started losing it. But again, as I said, I thought that was how every father felt. But it was when that just kind of took its toll, and then there was lots of different things as well. So I wasn't really thinking straight. I was real irrational thinking, and my anxiety was really high as well. And also, and guilt just started to really kick in as well. So I had this real irrational guilt. So if, for example, there were things I hadn't done, whether that be at work or home, I'd just felt this real overwhelming sense of guilt, and it really plays on my mind a lot. And it got to the point, even getting out of bed, it was like being chained to the bed. Like I had to try and break free of these chains, and that's honestly how it felt. And it made me kind of feel like I didn't really want to help my partner, like in the night and stuff like that. And, add that on, that increased the sense of guilt as well. And then for me to actually get help, it took me to actually say something on the lines of, I'm no good to this world. And that's when it really hit me. And I thought, well, I need help. And really the main barrier for not getting help sooner, this was, when I started counselling, this was about 9 months down the line, I think. And that for me was kind of the final straw. And the barriers that stopped me getting help sooner was simply because I thought, well, every father goes through is, being a new parent, it's all new, we've got to get used to it, but it wasn't getting any better. And I think as well, there was a real sense of, being the man, men can't show their weaknesses and that kind of stuff. I was brought up to be that way, actually not to really show emotion and not to really talk about things. And that didn't help at all, very evidently. So those were kind of the times where I really noticed when my mental health was declining. What can nurses or student nurses do to recognise signs, and how can you approach the topic? Tricky one, because, with something like postnatal depression, for any parent, mother or father, it can happen at any time within the first year of the baby's life, and it's very difficult to sometimes spot because of, some people are just so good at covering it up, so they can just put on a real brave face. And for a lot of people, when I went through postnatal depression, I had no idea I had postnatal depression whilst I was at work, but I still worked. And, I was able to put on a relatively brave face. The only person who really knew it wasn't right was my partner, because she knows me so well. But I think really look out for very typical, almost like pattern of events, I would say. So, if you started noticing, say, that someone's not sleeping a lot, they've got real low mood, they may be thinking irrationally, or may have, clearly very anxious as well. But this has got to be a real pattern as well. You can't, and in terms of kind of approaching the topic, the very important thing to do is just don't force someone to talk about how they're feeling. Some people may need time, and what you have to do is build that therapeutic relationship with someone so that they can feel safe enough to share information with you, especially if they're struggling. And you've got to really try and put themselves in, put yourself in their shoes, that they're feeling vulnerable, they're probably feeling very guilty, they're probably, especially for fathers as well, they may feel like they can't share how they're feeling because that's not the way that they've been brought up. So just really, gently remind people that you're here, and even if you do say along the lines of, it's okay to not to feel the way that you are, that just kind of gives some reassurance as well. So, advice about approaching difficult conversations with fathers. As I said in the previous video, just build that therapeutic relationship and just be patient, but also be honest as well. And just keep on giving some real reassuring phrases such as "it's okay to not feel okay." But the worst things to say are things like, "Oh, it will get better." Now, things like that, it's difficult because if you say things will get better, when you are depressed or anxious, your mind does not really have any concept of time. So you may have, say, worries about something in the future. So a father or mother might be worrying about something in the future. So let's say, for example, you're looking after a baby with congenital heart defect. They're going to have a lot on their mind, and their minds are going to think it's all happening now. But it's not. So actually what you've got to really do is just put the focus on what is presently happening. So it's all about thinking about mindfulness, essentially. So just put things into perspective and just think, right, concentrate on what's happening right now. And, even if you kind of make them just take a breath for about, for a minute, just do some nice deep breaths with them just to calm them down. And then they might be in a better place then to talk. Because if they're going to speak with emotion, that's not going to be constructive. They've got to try, in order to try and get their logical side, you've got to just get them to really balance their emotion. Those deep breaths a minute will massively help as well. And honesty is really important as well. So you've just got to, as I say, just communicate with what is currently happening now. Be honest, be respectful, and be empathetic. So really put yourselves in their shoes as well with how they're feeling. In terms of recommended resources, I've always found personal blogs are absolutely brilliant. So if you search for personal blogs by, say, new fathers, that is really powerful because you really get the perspective from how they felt, and therefore you can really put yourselves in their shoes as nurses. Other resources. So there's also quite a few TED Talks about depression. So one particular one I would recommend is one from Mark Williams, who he was a father. He had postnatal depression himself, and he talks about his experiences. And this is really interesting. He even talks about things like alcoholism as well. There's also some journal articles. There's one in particular I recommend, which is it's entitled "Forgotten Fathers: Postnatal Depression in Men," and that you can Google that. So that's from Google Scholars, so you can find that really, really easy. That's a really powerful article as well. And then also just the very quite a lot of charities websites. So like Mind, for example, is a great example. The Mental Health Foundation as well. They've got some really fantastic stuff out there. So there's really fortunate there's so much more out there about mental health in men than there used to be. I mean, when I first started suffering from postnatal depression, there wasn't a lot of information there, and this was 3 years ago. But now it's getting a lot better. There's more and more out there. And Twitter accounts as well. There is From Lads to Dads. That's a really good Twitter account to follow, particularly if you want to look at paternal mental health. For other kind of obviously you've got things like Mind, you've got the Mental Health Foundation, you've got Anxiety UK. They're really great as well. But also some of the local charities. I really think about the local charities. So I live around Sutton Coldfield kind of way. So I have been in contact with Acacia before. They're a fantastic organisation. They've got great resources on their website. So think local really. And then another Twitter account to follow is Evenhood, and that's run by Jonathan Phelan, who is he's a guy who raises awareness of PTSD and his experience of having PTSD, and the advice he has is phenomenal. So definitely check him out as well. The pandemic would have massively affected fathers, especially new fathers. I have had that experience because I had our second little boy during the lockdown, and it was awful because I couldn't go to any of the appointments. The only appointments I was able to go to were the scans. But even that was a bit of a minefield to try and get around. But I couldn't go to any of the midwifery appointments, and there was no antenatal classes at the time as well. So I can imagine for a new father that it would be a real struggle, especially without antenatal classes or anything like that. But for me personally, I was very fortunate because I was working from home. So, I'm very blessed to say that my postnatal depression did not come back for when my son was born, and he's now a year old. So I'm kind of past the danger zone for postnatal depression, which I'm absolutely thrilled with. And yes, and for me working from home, it made a huge difference because I was able to, balance work with life a little bit better. I was able to spend time with my son and my daughter as well. And actually, we had a great bond, and so much so that I'm really happy that with the bond that I've got with both my son and daughter now, and it's absolutely amazing. Which is why, in some ways, I really hope I can still work from home for the foreseeable future because it has produced so many benefits as well, and I'm also able to support my partner as well. So there wasn't any sense of guilt from being at work and knowing that partner's not having a good day, for example, and it just reduces that down. So I can be on hand to help as well. So, but I've spoken to many other fathers during the pandemic, and they've really struggled. But luckily, I've managed to get them to really talk about how they're feeling, and they're getting through it. So, and that's what's important. Everyone's just got to keep talking about how they're feeling, and that's why it's fantastic to raise this kind of awareness as well. How to make fathers feel more involved? Well, certainly from my experiences, when we had my daughter 3 years ago and when I had postnatal depression, when the health visitors came around, nobody asked me at all if I was okay. No one at all. It was always directed towards my partner. And, I understood because, of course, my partner was the mother. She'd been through a huge deal with the pregnancy. So, of course, all attention was on my partner. But it would have been nice to also have been included by being asked, are you okay as well? And especially as I could have said, do you know what? Yeah, I'm not feeling 100%. And, I just didn't really feel like I could talk to them as well because, they didn't really build that therapeutic relationship. I didn't feel like they cared at all. So definitely just get fathers involved with conversations, really ask for what their opinion is or if they're okay, do they understand what's been said? And exactly the same if you're in SCBU or NICU as well, just get fathers as involved as they can. But as I say in the previous video, don't push them, just do what's in their comfort zone. They may need a bit of time just to get through because let's be honest, they're going to be scared. They might not show that they're scared, but they are guaranteed they're going to be scared. They're going to be anxious because let's be honest, their world has changed with having a child, and that's exactly how I felt. And honestly, when I look back from my own personal experience, I honestly thought the reason why people didn't really ask me and my partner if we were okay with everything is because we were nurses. They knew we were nurses, so they thought instantly, oh, you know what we're doing. But the reality is we had no idea what we were doing. It's completely different. Being a parent, being a nurse, two completely different things. We knew nothing about being a parent, and it would have been nice just to have had that extra input from there. I think if I was to think back about if anything could have been different, if there was things that can be put into place, definitely Pacific antenatal classes for fathers, but also antenatal classes that were at a suitable time. I was very lucky I was able to attend some of the antenatal classes because of the flexibility of my work, being a lecturer. But I can imagine that not many fathers have that opportunity. So if they were at a better time, say in the evening, so that fathers could come, then that would just give an opportunity for fathers to ask questions because the problem, particularly in management lockdown, a lot of it has had to have been guesswork, perhaps with even using things like Google to really try and understand what they are doing or what they need to do. But I think to have a particular antenatal session for fathers, and particularly just tell them what they can do to be the best dad that they can be, but also the best partner that they can be as well. Because raising a baby, it's a team effort at the end of the day. And I honestly believe that if one person's mental health is, well balanced, and if the others is a little bit unstable, then will be in a good place to support that partner and therefore prevent further deterioration of the other half's mental health. So that's why I really am very passionate about raising awareness of postnatal depression in fathers, and that has to also be mentioned as well. There has got to be education around postnatal depression, and more of it, particularly in fathers, and saying to fathers, it is okay to talk about how you are feeling. And it is a myth to say that if you talk about your emotion, it's a sign of weakness. It is not. You are so strong if you can talk about your emotion. That goes to everyone, men, women, children, young people, you name it. Everyone is so strong if they can share how they're feeling and share their emotions, because the only way we can balance our emotions is if we get it out of our minds and we talk about it. So that would be what I would definitely recommend going forward. So more education around postnatal depression, and also just some extra support for fathers in the antenatal period so that they can ask whatever questions they have and they can be the best fathers and partners that they can be.